This story is about a girl named Camille Oxalis. She is one of the daughters of the Duke. Camille is the illegitimate child of an ordinary woman, and for this reason, she was disrespected and bullied even by her assistants. Her father always didn't care about her. He cared more about his youngest daughter, Katla. She was born to a woman of royalty. The girl was very beautiful and had a talent in magic. She was much more loved than her older sister, and there was a very great injustice in that. The sisters had a good relationship, but it only seemed that way from the outside. The younger sister always pretended to be very caring and loving to her older sister. And more often than not, when they were in her father's presence, Cuddle would purposely try to do something good to make herself look better than her sister. Camille had never noticed it, and mistakenly thought she was lucky to have such a good stepsister. One day, Cuddle decided to give her sister her ribbon, and said it should make her feel happier, because she thought Camille looked too sad. And it wouldn't be surprising if even in this situation, the result is some sort of catch-22. At that moment, Camille finally smiled, because she didn't expect to receive such a beautiful gift. But after a while, things came to a head. As expected, the father noticed the younger sister's ribbon from the older sister, and thought Camille had taken it away from her. But when the girl tried to explain and say it was a gift, nobody even listened to her. When suddenly her little sister came in and for some reason said it wasn't a gift at all, and that the ribbon was just a temporary gift. Camille didn't know how to react to this at all, or how to explain that it wasn't her fault, and she had no bad intentions, as her father had thought. There would be nothing special in this situation, if it weren't for one thing common to this family. The girl was brutally punished for it, which was her sister's plan. It's amazing that Camille still hasn't realized that it's time for her to open her eyes and see who her sister really is. After all, if she finally analyzes all recent situations, one could conclude that all is not as it seems at first glance. But for now, the girl mistakenly believes that all this will change at some point, and that in fact, someone still loves her in the meantime. They're all going to a ball at the royal palace. And even in this situation, it was very noticeable from the outside that her father and younger sister considered her superfluous. Catlet was very excited about the trip, and couldn't wait to finally be able to have some fun, to which her father replied that there was no point in them rushing to the palace, for he thought it would be a good idea to take the opportunity to walk through the streets of the capital, to which Cattle replied that it was a very good idea. And at this point, Camilla decided to speak her mind, and suggested that it would not be nice to keep His Highness waiting. And judging by the man's reaction, he didn't even like the fact that his eldest daughter had decided to speak her mind. He asked if she didn't like something. The girl immediately apologized, and told her to be wrong. And at this point, the younger sister decided to support her father, and said that he actually offered a very good option. Besides, she thought, it had been a long time since they'd been out together, and if the opportunity came up, they should take it. To which Camille said she was right. But at the same time, it was very unpleasant for her to hear the remark and feel guilty, because she just wanted to make the best of it and didn't mind the walk at all. As is usually the case in such situations, Camille starts to feel guilty and tries to justify her father and sister, thinking that maybe they are right, and that she shouldn't resent them at all, because they know better how to act in this or that situation. Because of this, she has developed a habit of turning every idea and opinion she has into something meaningless and thinking it's a bad idea or a bad decision. And instead of standing up for what she thinks, she's used to apologizing and listening to people who don't care about her and who hate her. Along the way, they all genuinely enjoyed the ride and kept looking at the beautiful views around them. Since they very rarely go out and travel, such moments seem to be really special and amazing for them. Meanwhile, all got out of the carriage, and as the father observed a large flock of birds flying by, he asked his eldest daughter to come a little nearer to the bolita, for they were heading southward. At this point, the girl started making excuses for her relatives again, and pointed out how nice it was that they were all spending time together. Plus, it was the first time she'd been taken outside the mansion, for which she was very grateful. The girl wanted to tell her father about it, but she didn't even have time to finish the sentence. How he had pushed her over the cliff, and it became clear why he had asked her to come to this spot. He had a completely cold look in his eyes, and there was not a shred of regret for the act. He had done it deliberately, and from the looks of it, that was his plan. In that second, The girl couldn't believe that he'd done that to her, and it seemed to make sense to her now. At this point, while the girl could still hear him, her father apologized and explained that it was today that the prince would be choosing a bride for himself, and he wanted to do everything he could to make sure the prince chose his youngest daughter, Katla, and someone like her, Camilla, didn't deserve that. All because she was born to an ordinary woman who was from an ordinary family and had no status in the kingdom. Then, even more surprisingly, following her, he threw some kind of bouquet in there and said it was his parting gift to her. It's impossible to believe that a father could do this to his daughter, who is not to blame for being born to a woman he didn't love and once abandoned. We can conclude that they only took the girl with them to get rid of her right before the big event. It seems impossible to describe her emotions and feelings at that moment, because there is nothing worse than the feeling of betrayal, especially by a father or another close person. But still, thanks to this situation, she was finally able to draw conclusions and realized for sure that all this time, she was wrong and mistakenly thought that someone loved her. Suddenly her consciousness began to fade away, and judging by the looks of it, this was the end. The girl was pretty sure that this was the end of it all. It was like a terrible dream in which she would not have to suffer, for she would never open her eyes again in this terrible world. As suddenly, the girl began to feel warm and felt that something had happened to her. She begins to hear some unfamiliar voices, and as if to feel that someone has been waiting for her very much and already loves her very much. After a while she discerned some man and woman, but it was all very much like that they're excited about a newborn baby. And this baby is Camille, and this is her new life. At this point, the woman turned to her husband and reminded him that he could call this child by his name, because he already had one. This child is very small with green eyes, and it is obvious from his emotions that he is seeing these people for the first time, but realizes that they are his parents. The father turned to his daughter and said that she was the flower of hope of this country, and that he was grateful to the universe for producing such a beautiful daughter. They named her Anemone, and apparently that name has some meaning because it sounds very unusual. The man is still very happy about the baby and can barely hold back from crying. After him, the girl was greeted by her mom. She also admired this child and couldn't believe they had him. When suddenly, very suddenly, Anemone started crying, and apparently she didn't like something. At that moment, the girl who had been reborn into this child's body was very surprised that she was still alive. The next day she was taken to the children's room, which was ready for renovation. It was a very bright room, but there was a slight disadvantage to it. There was a lot of light in the room, and for a small child, it was very difficult to look towards the window. It caused some discomfort. Plus, in addition to the bright lights, she could hear loud noises, and also, in those clothes, she was terribly uncomfortable. At this point, she begins to reflect that she remembers exactly how she died in a past life. Her father pushed her off a cliff, and in the last moments of her life, she wanted very badly to disappear from that world forever, never to see those faces again, and never to know those people she mistakenly trusted and thought they were incapable of something like that. It was amazing and strange for her to feel that she was breathing again, and to realize that she still had a long way to go. After a while, some boy came up to her, and apparently it was her older brother, who was eager to see his newborn sister. He didn't expect that as soon as she opened her eyes, she would start crying and screaming loudly. At that moment, some assistant came up to them and asked why the boy had entered the princess's room without permission, to which the boy replied that he had done nothing wrong. It turns out he is the first principal of the kingdom of Ricole, and his name is Jean Ricole Gentian. Afterward, Jean reminded her that he was his sister's older brother and had a right to look at her, so he felt he had done nothing wrong. But the assistant didn't know what to say to him, and at that moment, the boy's parents came into the room and asked him not to argue with the assistant, and said that he just had to warn me that he was going to see his sister so that someone would know about it. To which the boy replied that he understood everything, and next time he would be sure to warn someone. The kingdom of Ricole is ruled by the Gentian family, and the girl has been reborn. Their youngest daughter, Anemone Ricole Gentian. The kingdom of Ricole is not very big, but the people love it and protect it under all circumstances. The current royal dynasty began to use magical artifacts. Magic here is a valuable skill, mastering which can easily get rich. A lot of people know this, and for years and years people have been trying to use this information and learn magic. But unfortunately, or fortunately, not everyone can do it, and not many people are able to do it. So recall is known all over the world. Meanwhile, her parents began to admire their child again, and this time, they were as excited about her as when they first saw her. As a friend, their son also wanted to look at his sister, for he was also interested in watching this little girl and her first emotions, to which his mother replied that there was no need to wake the child, and it was better to wait until she woke up, and then we could look at her. Apparently, the girl has finally had her dream come true, and is in a family where she is truly loved, and will never do what her father did in her past life. Sometime later, Jean's father asked if he should be at school at that time, to which Jean replied that all classes were over in the morning, and he had a meeting with the teachers from the magic tower in the evening. Immediately afterward, the boy didn't miss the opportunity to look at his sister again, as suddenly, Anemona wakes up and opens her eyes. They were a very beautiful green emerald hue. It's amazing. Even though the girl is in this child's body, she continues to think like an adult. And once she sees the smiles of these people, she somehow gets disgusted remembering her past. One can only hope that someday it will pass, and she will be a happy child of this family. But she's also understandable, because what she's been through is something you can't quickly forget and start a new life. All that constant bullying, trying to remind her that she couldn't handle anything, would stay in her memory for a long time. Once upon a time, her father had given her poison and ordered her to use healing magic, because knowledge should be passed down from generation to generation. But as it happened, she had never succeeded, and for that reason, she had to suffer and constantly hear from her father how ashamed he was of her and more. But the thing is, she's never been properly explained how to use her powers, so she's never been able to learn how to use them. When she was sick from the poison, instead of helping, he reminded and talked about how she was a disgrace to their family. As usual, Camille apologized to him and felt guilty for it. And when her sister came to see her, the girl, as it turned out, mistakenly thought that she was the only one who could understand her and genuinely wanted to help her. At that point, the girl didn't even realize that there was a possibility that her sister was involved and was just hiding the fact that she was of the same opinion as her father. And apparently she was very good at it, because after all these years, Camille never figured it out. It is very strange that there was not a single situation, after which the girl at least a little bit could suspect something and think that everything is not as it seems to her. That's when they started having a conversation about how, according to the younger sister, the only problem is that the girl has no talent for magic, although that hasn't actually been proven yet. I'm surprised that her sister at least tried to pretend to be nice to her. And at the same time, her father didn't hide his opinion and attitude towards his eldest daughter at all. It would be very interesting to see the girl's reaction and answers if she had found out that these two were not to be trusted in any way. It's incredibly frustrating to realize that Camille, just because of who her mother is, has had to suffer her whole life, even though it's not really that woman's fault that she made the mistake of meeting such a man either, who many years later will hate her and their daughter. But unfortunately, no one could see the future, and it remains only to learn from their mistakes. And luckily, remembering her past, Camille still had the opportunity to do so. Apparently her whole past life has been the biggest lesson, and thanks to all the mistakes and missteps in her new life, she won't make them, and can be happy. At some point, she got tired of remembering her past life, and wanted to finally enjoy her new one. It's very interesting to see what she'll be like in her new body, and what she'll want to change now that the opportunity has come up. Meanwhile, her brother's still around. He's always with her. He was very interested in watching her wake up and look into her eyes. After a while, he took her in his arms and started talking about how much he loved her, and how long he'd been waiting for her to show up. It turns out he really had always dreamed of having a sister, and when she finally arrived, Jean was the happiest in the world and thanked his parents for it. Except the thing is, because of the past, the girl doesn't believe any good words and thinks she doesn't deserve such kind words in her direction. It's really hard for her to believe that all these people are really sincere about her, and that they're actually happy to have her in their family. Meanwhile, when they were all in the room, Jean said in front of everyone that he would protect her from all the bad things in the world. And when the parents heard about it, they were very pleased to realize that Jean genuinely loved her sister. After a while, they brought a lot of children's toys for Anemone, but I guess they were a little hasty with that, because at her age, it's not really necessary. Turns out it was just in honor of her birthday. And besides, her parents just really wanted to buy her a lot of toys. They wanted to make her happy and see her smile. But instead, the girl didn't smile at all and was obviously upset about something, and all because she couldn't forget her past, which was very hard and memorable. But her new family is confident that sooner or later, she'll get used to them and start to feel safe. They told her every few minutes how much they loved her and how beautiful she was. It was as if they all knew that the girl understood them very well and realized how she was really being treated. Suddenly, Anemone fell asleep again, and it is not surprising, because all little children fall asleep very often, and it happens even that it happens very unexpectedly. Meanwhile, there is a very good atmosphere in their house and that everyone devotes their attention to her. The next day, there's still plenty of sunlight coming into her room, and no wonder the first person who wanted to see her since morning was her brother. He looked at her and rejoiced as if he were seeing her for the first time, his emotions still as lovely as they had been yesterday. Jean hoped very much that she would live a day as beautiful as this, and finally smile today. Surprisingly, even as the girl slept, she understood everything perfectly well and continued to think about something. She was very curious to know whether these people would be as kind to her when she woke up. From then on, some more time passed and her mom came over. She had a smile on her face, and it's no wonder because being behind her child, it can't be any other way. It turns out the woman had asked artists she knew to paint a portrait of her with her child, and at this point, these artists were being supervised by her husband and son. They were very interested to see the result. But at some point, they were afraid to say that they were very disappointed. They clearly didn't like something about it. And after a few minutes, they decided to tell the artist that mom and baby are actually much cuter and more beautiful than they portrayed them in their paintings. To which the artist replied that they try their best to convey everything as much as possible as it is in real life, and that it is impossible to do better. The man did not hide his dissatisfaction, and said that they were not as professional artists as they told about themselves when they first met them. But surprisingly, the artist didn't think so, and tried to convince them that they would definitely like the result. At this point, the woman overheard this conversation, and unfortunately was very upset. She stopped believing that she would like the result of their work. And of course, Anemone was well aware of what was going on around her, and she even felt sorry for her parents. At this moment, Jean casually looked at the time and remembered his plans. It was surprising to him that it was already so late, and the time had passed too unnoticed. So he warned his parents and had to go to class, though he really didn't want to, because it was much more interesting to be with his sister and be present with his family at that moment. Jean walked over to her and said goodbye. He was sorry to have to leave her for a few hours and go to class. Girl was born a princess, whom everybody wants to look at and be near. She was like a flower in a greenhouse, but her brother, another. He had very little free time and very many commitments to become a strong and worthy protector of his family. From his childhood, he studied many sciences and often went to various classes, and all this was practically without rest or days off. But surprisingly, he somehow managed to do it and even enjoyed it. Somehow, by some miracle, he understood a lot and was capable of almost anything. Jean is the crown prince and future king of Recall. He has to study a lot, because without it, will not be able to become a worthy ruler. But his sister is welcome just because she came into this world. She doesn't have to do anything. All she has to do is smile and everyone will be happy. It turns out that her older brother must be in the same situation as she was in the past. It was a great surprise to her that he genuinely loved her, and wasn't jealous at all. She knows how unpleasant and very painful it is to do the impossible just to get some attention. Anyway, maybe the girl will just learn that not always. Older kids are jealous of younger kids and not always. Any of the kids feel less loved than the second child in the family. Meanwhile, her family was greatly disturbed by one very surprising thing. They were alarmed by the fact that Anemone hadn't woken up since the day she was born, and it was very strange. Her father wanted to know the reason and see if it was normal, or if something needed to be done about it. He even began to suspect that perhaps it was the result of some disease or even a curse. And you immediately his panic and desire to call all possible magicians of this kingdom and all known healers. He was ready to do anything, as long as his daughter was healthy. But for some reason, the girl's mom was completely calm and even smiling. She told him not to worry, as if she knew something already. She didn't look worried or panicky because maybe she does know something. They all want her awakening so badly. Only she, remembering her past, doesn't want it. The girl is so sure that there's no such thing as too much of a good time that she doesn't even see the point of waking up and getting excited about a new life that's much better than the last one. She doesn't want to know despair again, and then find out there's no one in the world who can love her for nothing. Anemone was sure it would be far better to sleep an eternal sleep than to open her eyes and be disappointed again. Meanwhile, the father was dissatisfied with something and addressed his son. Apparently his bad mood was a consequence of his anxiety. And not surprisingly, he decided to look for anyone to blame, and the first person he found was Jean. The man was really very angry, and it's not clear yet if it's really justified. He asked his son what had happened to him and why he looked like that, to which the boy replied that nothing bad had happened, and he was fine. After this, not surprisingly, Jean went first to his sister, and was very glad to see her. He could not get enough of her pretty face, and was still waiting for her to finally wake up, because it had been days. It turns out that the reason he looked strange to his father was because Jean picked a lot of flowers for his sister on the way home, and said that she was named after these very flowers, and that she was as beautiful as they were. And also, she may be asleep and can't see their beauty, but maybe she'll enjoy at least their incredible fragrance. But even in this situation, something didn't please his father, and he said that Jean could have asked the gardener, and he would have picked that bouquet for him. To which the boy replied that of course he did. But the point was that he wanted to pick them for his sister, and from that moment, the man was simply unrecognizable. He told his son that he would also like to give his daughter a lot of things, but does not act so radically. And surprisingly, his wife somehow started laughing quietly and didn't try to defend her son. At this moment, Anemone finally heard the scent of those flowers, and was incredibly surprised that they were given just for her. As suddenly, her mother noticed her and drew the attention of the whole family. The woman did not even expect that her child could wake up thanks to the pleasant aroma of flowers, but the girl at that moment was only thinking about whether there was any point in being excited about a new life and giving these people a chance. At that moment, the most incredible thing happened. Anemone opens her eyes and looks at her parents. Did she really find it interesting, and decided to go on with her life? Because in any case, she'd feel much better here than in the past. And also, it was still amazing to her to see people who were happy just to have her look at them. After a while, she was dressed in a nice outfit and finally calmed down, because they made sure she was okay. The whole family decided to take a walk with their daughter around their mansion. And at that moment, all the helpers were busy doing something. And in one room, there were too many of them for some reason. Apparently everyone's getting ready for an event, so there were so many people doing something. Today is indeed a very important day for the whole family, but especially it was a very special day for Jean. The woman slowly began to tell her daughter that today her older brother would take a very important oath, and from that moment on, his life would change very much. It turns out that although the people have already recognized him as the future ruler of the kingdom, Jean only wants to hold the event after his sister wakes up. It was a great surprise to the girl. She did not understand whether he loved her so much that he was willing to postpone his oath of office for his sister's sake. As suddenly, he looked in the direction of his mom and sister quite casually, and saw that Anemone was finally awake. But for some reason, the girl wasn't smiling at all, which is typical for kids her age. But even at that moment, Anemone was well aware of how special this day was for him, and how worried he must be right now. But on the other hand, she didn't care at all. Though maybe she was only telling herself that because she didn't want to accept her new life and these people. Because really, nothing bad was going on. That she wouldn't care about anything, especially her brother who loves her dearly. This kingdom is known to the Mages of Light. It is said that it was founded by a magical beast, which consisted of the energy of goodness, and now every inhabitant carries a piece of the power of this creature, and Anemone included. It becomes very interesting to see if in time they will love her as much as they did in the early days of her birth. Meanwhile, she and her parents look at her brother and marvel that he has all this going on at such an early age, and that at this point he's taking on a lot of responsibility. That's really impressive. But that wasn't all. According to the rules of such events, he must get his own sword and sign some sort of document. And also, on top of all this, he was handed a very important item. Looks like a piece of jewelry around his neck. But obviously it's not just a piece of jewelry, and there's some very important meaning to it. As a result, the whole ceremony went according to plan and was quite successful. The boy was very happy with his new status. Jean was proclaimed the next king of Ricole, something he had dreamed of for so long, all his life. After such an important event, the whole family starts congratulating him and tells him what's in store for him a few years later. And after that, of course, it was time to admire this beautiful baby who really did look like a blossom. The girl's father marveled at what a beautiful daughter he had, and that he couldn't believe there were now 4 of them. I get the impression that when she grows up, she and her brother will have a really good relationship, because it can't be any other way. After a while, their parents started talking about how it would be nice to finally show off their new princess to their people. They didn't even doubt that everyone would definitely like her a lot. They're looking forward to seeing how excited people will be to see her show up. But Anemone was of a slightly different opinion and didn't understand what they meant. After all, it would all be organized in honor of Jean, not in honor of her birthday. Apparently, the girl is just still very much afraid that her older brother will hate her and think she's more loved, just because she's still little. But anyway, so far he's fine with it. He's even asked his parents about walking down the hall with her. You could see from him that the boy was very proud to have a sister and wanted to show her off to everyone around him. But when the girl began to show with all her appearance that she did not like something, and everything around made her uncomfortable, Jean concluded that perhaps she did not like noisy places. But it seems the girl was in no mood to be happy at this moment, and even less so, she didn't want to look him in the eye. But even so, Jean was still very happy, and would happily show his sister to everyone around him. And strangely enough, people were very interested in looking at this child. Most really admired her beauty and how small she is still. Jean had yet to meet a single person who said otherwise or pretended not to be interested in it. Mostly girls came to look at little Anemone. They thought she was very cute and said she had incredibly beautiful eyes. Except the kid wasn't exactly thrilled that so many people wanted to look at her and that she couldn't do anything about it. She wanted very badly to go somewhere or ask her brother not to show her to anyone. But since she can't talk, she has to endure and feel discomfort. After a while, Anemone realized that she had no other option but to just close her eyes and wait for the moment it was all over. When suddenly, some man approached them, and even Jean didn't know how to react to it. This man immediately said hello and said he was honored to see Prince Jean, except that when Anemone saw this man, she didn't even know what to make of it, because it was him, her father from her past life. But how could this happen? And is it really such a coincidence? The girl vividly remembers his face as she fell down the mountain, and he rejoiced in that, and without a second thought, made that choice. Anemone wanted to do the same thing to him, and if there was anything she could do to get him kicked out of here, she would definitely do it. It turns out that the girl turned into a different person, but stayed in the same world and time. At this point, Jean asked him if he was the Duke of Oxalis, to which the man replied that he was very pleased that the prince had remembered his name. Jean said that he couldn't help but remember, because the ducal family from the kingdom of Amphi is very famous, and few people don't know about it. And immediately after his words, the man turned his attention to the little girl in his arms, and was very much interested in her. It's very interesting to watch this situation, because now something truly amazing is happening. The person who destroyed her in a past life is now, at this moment, saying how beautiful she is. You should ban a man like him from going near children, because he doesn't deserve it. The girl's emotions at that moment were so ambiguous, but mostly she had a feeling of hatred and a desire for revenge against this man. After a while, they talked for a while, and the man asked to shake hands with the crown prince. The boy's guards were against it, because according to the rules it is strictly forbidden. But Jean stopped them and still agreed to shake his hand. If he had only known how cruel this man was, he would never in his life have done this, nor would he have allowed him anywhere near his sister after what he had done to her in a past life. Oxalis. These are wizards who specialize in poisons and curses. They can destroy a person with a single touch, and apparently the guards wanted to forbid this man from approaching the prince for a reason. As suddenly, Anemone realized she had to save her brother and do everything she could to keep him from touching this man. And at that moment, something inexplicable happened. This man felt a strong blow that instantly pushed him away from the prince, very curious if he realized who prevented him from touching the boy. The assistants immediately began to ask if he was all right, but the man replied that he was fine and tried not to show that he was very surprised. Jean didn't understand at all what was going on, and very much wondered if he guessed that just now his sister might have saved his life. After that, the man was very wary and said it was time for him to leave. As a result, nobody but the girl understood what was going on. Their parents ran up to them and started to ask if they were hurt and if everything was all right. It turned out that Anemone had spent all her strength on this magical blow, and as a result, she was very much in need of sleep to recover and get some rest. At this moment, which was very surprising, Jean seriously assumed that it was she who had repulsed the man, but he could not understand whether she had been born with any powers. The boy began to look at his sister quite differently, and realized that she was really, but as yet did not know from what exactly. When he suddenly felt like he had it all figured out and could explain it to his parents. But it's obvious he only had that reaction as a result of his surprise, and it's perfectly normal. He said that, in his opinion, the court wizards were right, and his sister was indeed the reincarnation of the Holy Maiden. But as the girl heard his every word, she realized that he was very much mistaken. But for now, to tell the whole truth, she could not tell him. She decided to let this rescue be a token of gratitude for his very good deed, namely for that lovely bouquet of flowers he picked and gave her a few days ago. Since then, it's been a long time, 6 years. A lot has changed. There were many different items on the table, and they were the purpose of this conversation. The head of the family was asking some man if all these items were fakes. He was told that, unfortunately, horrifying replicas of their magical attributes were appearing on the market more and more often, and they were unable to stop their production. At that moment, his daughter came into the room and apologized for having to pause their important conversation. After all these years, Anemone has grown up and is a very beautiful girl. She has gorgeous blue hair and green eyes, which give her appearance a special uniqueness. It turns out that the man her one was talking to was her grandfather. He and her hadn't seen each other in a long time and were very happy to see each other. Her grandfather said that she had grown a lot since the last time they had met, and had become even more beautiful. Anemone thanked him, and said she was very pleased to hear that. Turns out this man's name is Renoa Duol, the father of her mother, Queen Rafina, and he has a great responsibility for the wizards of the royal court. But apparently there are some problems with that. Renoa said that unfortunately it is very difficult to know whether the instrument is a fake or not, perhaps only after examination, and that it's virtually impossible to visually determine whether an object is real or not. And at this point, no one has ever been able to do so. As suddenly, Anemone began to realize how she could help in this situation, and decided to check something out. For starters, she asked to close all the curtains in that room, but no one understood what that was for, or what she was going to do. After that, the girl tried to use her hand to scan all of these objects. It was certainly not easy, but she was sure that at least she could see something. Her grandfather didn't expect her to have such abilities. And at this point, she began to tell them that crafts don't spark when using light magic. A real item should send out an impulse in response. After that, her grandfather said that he couldn't even think of such a method existing. And then, her father asked to inform all the wizards of the royal palace and have all the magic tools examined. Anemone, of course, began to praise and say, "What a clever girl she is, if she could come up with such an idea." But in fact, the girl saw traces of dark magic, but preferred not to talk about it, because she did not want to attract unnecessary attention to herself. She could have told them a lot more, but in this situation, it could only make things worse. Besides, the people of the kingdom already believed that the girl was born with a magical gift, and also that her abilities developed without direction or help from teachers, which was also very surprising to everyone. But most of all, her parents were happy about it. They were proud of her and realized that they really have a very capable child. The wizards in the tower said she had great potential as a holy maiden, one of the founders of the kingdom of Ricol. But for the girl herself, her abilities are not something surprising. It's as if she knew from birth that she couldn't be an ordinary child and that she had to be special. Legend has it that the Holy Virgin saw the magic of the entire world, and apparently Anemone is the only one who, since that time, has gained such an ability. Some people are constantly speculating about whether it has something to do with her being born into a royal family, and whether it's possible that this could have happened if she had been born into an ordinary family. But even with her success in this field, she wanted to find out more about it, for she felt that it was definitely not enough. And fortunately, in this life she is allowed to read and study, which she wasn't before. Apparently she was specifically forbidden to do so because they knew she could get some results. Then she was locked up in a small, windowless room and never let out into the light or allowed to develop in any way, although she always had an interest in it. Because her mother was an ordinary person, without any status, the girl was considered not smart enough and was equated with an ordinary servant girl. But luckily, this time around, its boundaries are much wider, allowing you to achieve incredible things, thanks to endless possibilities. However, what the girl regrets very much is that she still can't get the memories of those people out of her head. Since their last meeting, these people have accomplished a lot and gotten everything they wanted. Rumor has it that a daughter from the ducal house of Oxalis is engaged to the prince of the kingdom of Amphi. Catlet is all very fond and happy that she is the one who will be the future queen. And also, her father is also very much loved. They created a legend that the eldest daughter, Camille, died of a terrible disease, and after that, people were very sympathetic to her and paid a lot of attention to this family. And of course, it was very convenient for them. Each of them was happy because they got what they wanted, but they only got it after they destroyed Camille. Unfortunately, Anemone is now unable to avenge them, but in any case, she has several options as to what she is going to do in the future, for she has so many possibilities, and importantly, the desire to. Meanwhile, when the girl was trying to create some book from the top shelf, her brother came to her rescue and did it in her place. As usual, he was always happy to come to the rescue and do anything to make her feel cared for and supported by him. Surprisingly, they still had a very good relationship. Like a real brother and sister. They never had any conflicts, which the two of them were very proud of and happy about. Jean is still incredibly amazed that she tries to learn something new every day, and all her free time. Read some books. Anemone could never explain why she liked it so much, and said there was nothing she could do about it. At that moment, Jean reminded her of how recently she had promised to come to him for tea, and how he had waited until the night before, and as a result, she had not come. And it turns out that the girl had forgotten all about it because she'd been engrossed in reading another book as usual. Her brother was very hurt at that moment, but in order not to show her his emotions, he just tried to hide it and said he wasn't upset with her at all. Afterward, as they sat at the back table talking about something, Anemone Poe asked if he knew this creature she had seen in the book, but since the guy was a little upset, he didn't want to answer her question, because even now, instead of talking, she was engrossed in something else. But in the end, he did tell her about the unicorn who, along with the saint, founded their kingdom and gave them magic. It turns out Jean sometimes teaches her the history of the kingdom, and unlike the tutor, he is patient and more attentive to her. Anemone is very grateful to him for this, and constantly tells him that he is a very good brother, and that she loves him very much. After some time of this lesson, the girl surprised her brother so much with her knowledge that he was surprised and said that he would not be able to teach her anything anytime soon enough, to which his sister replied that it meant she'd just bother him less and get closer to her goal. But my brother didn't have any trouble at all teaching her anything, and he even enjoyed doing it. But unfortunately, he's no longer good at surprising her and telling her new things. After that, Jean asked if it was boring for her to sit all day long and read in four walls, to which the girl replied that on the contrary, it was a very exciting occupation. Since the guy has been wanting to go out with her for a long time, he decided to take the opportunity and suggested we go to the theater, enjoy the performance, and live music. And strangely enough, Anemone immediately declined, and asked why he always wanted to take her out, to which her brother replied that books were good, but there was a whole world outside the window that she still hadn't seen, and, in his opinion, while they are still at that age, they should take advantage of this opportunity and go out as much as possible, because later on, they may not have time for it. He warned her that they were going to the most famous show in the kingdom, and she was very happy that he had agreed to his proposal. Judging by his reaction, Anemone still can't understand how he stopped wanting to spend his free time with her. After all, it's been so many years now. And to broach the subject with him, She decided to voice her opinion that he would rather have fun with his peers than spend all of his vacations with her. As soon as the guy thought about her words, one of the assistants came up to them. He wanted to say something to him, but Jean didn't even pay attention to him, and just ignored the man to tell his sister that it was her he wanted to spend his time with, and asked if that was a bad thing. To which the girl replied that it was not bad at all, though in fact, considering her past, such excessive love, she was very much alarmed today. When they had talked it over, and the girl was going about her business, the assistant came up to her, and told her that the queen wished to dine with her, but these words showed too strange for her. She didn't even have time to answer him anything. This assistant just walked away and didn't listen to her. Surprisingly, before, and her mom has never invited her for a private conversation, the girl can't even remember the last time she talked to her about anything serious. But since Anemone couldn't refuse, she still came to her mom and was on hold to find out the topic of this conversation. The queen had prepared a beautiful table for her with many different desserts and varieties of tea, and then the queen decided to ask her at once a very important question: whether her daughter would like to study magic at the academy. Anemone had of course assumed that this moment would soon come when they could discuss the topic, but she didn't think it would be now. But so the girl doesn't worry. Her mom warned her that there's no urgency. She's just interested in her daughter's opinion. Plus, according to the queen, since the girl already had a tutor and he no longer had anything to teach her, she might as well start learning real skills in magic. Even he was constantly very surprised that he had such a capable student who could memorize everything the first time around. A mom told her daughter that her father also approved of the idea and even wrote a letter of recommendation. So, it all depends on her decision and desire to develop in this field. Apparently her parents really want her to do magic, and of course, it would be a shame if such an amazing talent is lost. A few minutes later, while Anemone was thinking about her answer, the queen asked again what her daughter thought about it, to which the girl replied that she was only 6 years old, but the queen was sure that her age didn't matter at all, and she and her father had made that decision since Anemone was indeed a very talented and intelligent girl. And also, she said that her parents really dream of their daughter developing in this and having some successes. Once Anemone finally decided to answer her something, the queen ignored it for some reason, and started talking about how lonely she would be without her daughter in the palace, and even started crying. Even though it looked really weird from the outside, the girl decided to ask her brother what he thought about it. It turns out her whole family is of the same opinion, but they want her to be the one to make this big decision. The girl agreed, of course, but asked for a little time to think it over and give her a final answer. Her mother was very glad that the girl had agreed to think about it after all, and promised to give her answer after a while. Then the queen decided to change the subject and told her daughter that very soon there would be a tea party to which her friends would bring their daughters. Which means that according to her mom, Anemone will have the opportunity to meet new friends. But it doesn't seem to be something the girl would be really very happy about. And this news didn't surprise her at all. It doesn't make her happy for only one reason. Anemone once considered her sister a true friend, and for reasons she knows, she doesn't even want to hear the word. Unfortunately, a girl does not even realize what real friendship means and how wonderful it is to have a best friend. But at the same time, it is very important to choose that person who has no bad intentions and who will never betray you. The girl's mother immediately noticed that something was wrong with her daughter, for after her friend's word, she became very much upset and stopped looking at her. After that, they talked for a long time and it went pretty well. Meanwhile, the evening had come on, and all had gone to their rooms. But Anemone was not at all content to rest. She decided to take some time off and reflect on what she really wanted and what she was truly interested in. She had never thought about it before, but after talking to her brother and her mom, the girl realized that she could use some determination after all. Because sooner or later, there's going to come a point where she has to figure out what she wants to be and more. Except that her soul is still out for revenge and can't enjoy the happiness around her. She thinks about her past too often and can't find a way to finally settle down and start living a new life, because it's been a really long time, and it's time to forget about it. She's sick of even bringing it up, but the thoughts just keep popping up on their own and there's nothing she can do about it. Anemone sometimes even remembers that somewhere not far away lives the very man who once destroyed her for his own gain, and the only way she found it easiest and most necessary was to just go to sleep and not think about anything bad. Meanwhile, the next day had already come, and it was time for the tea party her mother had told her about. A lot of girls came with their moms, and they prepared a lot of different desserts, tea, and many other things for them. Each of them was very happy to be here and meet the new princess. Each of them smiled, but except for Anemone, she still couldn't calm down and enjoy what was happening. Girls who were sitting around offered her a taste of a very delicious tea, and told her that it had been brought from the eastern lands, but it turns out she just wanted to get out of there and finally be alone. Apparently she doesn't like being around people at all. These girls were talking about some sweets and things that to her were utterly uninteresting and too strange and meaningless a topic of conversation. Since they only talk about food and clothes, Anemone couldn't even imagine how she could be friends with them, much less have a conversation about those topics. When suddenly, one of them decided to demonstrate her abilities in magic and offered to let them see it. A girl recently learned some spell and said her teacher even praised her for it. Anemone didn't even know how to comment on that, because in her opinion, at that age, it was very hard for children to contain their powers, which could be very dangerous. And yet she showed one of her abilities. It was really very much like magic, but the result was that the magic was out of control. The girl had no control over anything and didn't know how to stop it. Everyone around them was very frightened, because they didn't realize how serious the consequences could be and how dangerous it was. It got to the point where every cup of tea started spilling over and almost broke all the dishes. There was a lot of noise and uncontrolled emotions, which once again proves that it is better not to use magic at such an early age, especially if a person is not confident and will not be able to stop if something goes out of control. Each of them tried to keep themselves safe somehow, but unfortunately, everything around them was so unpredictable that it was very difficult to do so. And also, as cups of tea were spilled around, many people got burns and experienced discomfort, because it was very hot, and you couldn't predict when something would spill on someone. And the worst part was that the tea was very hot. At that moment, Anemone wanted to make a difference and stop what was happening. She tried to channel all her energies and do something, for she could not bear it any longer. As a result, she still managed to get all those desserts and dishes down on the floor, and thus demonstrated some of her abilities. All the girls around her didn't even expect her to do something like this, and didn't think it was even possible to get out of it. It turns out that Anemone was very angry with this girl, and decided to explain something to her, namely, that magic is not a toy, because just now, it's hurt a lot of people, even though it could have been avoided. That girl immediately began to apologize for her act, and promised that she would never do something like that again, because she understood how wrong and thoughtless it was. Anemone decided to remind her once again that until she was confident in her abilities and powers, it was best not to demonstrate them to her acquaintances, for as she already knew, there might not be very pleasant consequences, and there may not always be someone around who can remedy that situation, like Anemone. After that, the girl just went about her business. She didn't want to keep talking to them about anything. She was sure that everyone would start feeling sorry for that magician, and no one would think that Anemone was really right. As she walked away from them, she didn't even care for the judgmental stares she'd grown accustomed to in her past life. Even though she was right, she had a feeling that she was about to be discussed, and thought she was some kind of mean and unfriendly person. When suddenly, on her way to her room, she heard someone's voice, but it wasn't the girl's, for it was a man's voice, which she had never heard before. Anemone turned around and saw a very handsome boy. He had blonde hair and green eyes and an overall memorable appearance. She was very curious to know who he was and what he needed. The guy immediately greeted her and introduced himself. His name is Luca von Gerbera, but this surname was too familiar to her. It turns out he noticed that the girl was a little dirty and wanted to offer her his handkerchief. But by soiled, he meant her tears, and apparently he didn't want to remind her later what she was crying about. Afterwards, the guy promised to tell everyone that it wasn't her fault, and that the girl was actually just worried about the guests, and therefore a little nervous. When suddenly, for some reason, she decided to leave him and said that she didn't care what other people thought, to which the guy replied that, in his opinion, she had acted like a real hero, and that he admired her. Luca wanted to be a shield and a sword for her. The girl was very surprised by these words, and didn't know how to react to it, because she had never heard such a thing before. She was very interested to meet him because he made a good first impression and was very pleasant to talk to. But for some reason, even though she was interested, Anemone replied that unfortunately, she didn't need something like that. And after that, she immediately left on her own business. It was very wrong to the guy, because he offered her his help and does not deserve to be treated in such a way. Apparently, because of the recent situation, the girl was so upset that she didn't want to talk to anyone or take anyone's suggestions. But after a while, when the girl had already entered the house, her father told her unexpected news, which she did not expect to hear at all. It turns out that from this day on, the son of the Marquis of Gerber will take care of her and her safety. When the girl saw this guy again, she is already in her home. She was really surprised. Right after her father's words, Luca once again told her how honored he was to protect such a beautiful princess. It turns out Luca is the son of Nanny Anemone. It was really unexpected. The girl's father tried to tell everything necessary and important about this boy's family, so that his daughter would better understand who this boy was. In his opinion, Anemone was at the age where she was entitled to personal protection, and right after that, it was important for him to ask her opinion. The girl, of course, thanked her father for his kindness, but at the same time, there was no joyful emotion on her face at all. After that, the man decided to leave them alone and give them a chance to socialize and get to know each other a little better. The guy and the girl sat down at the table and started talking about something. Since they already knew each other a little, it was a little easier for them to find a common topic to talk about. But even so, they felt a little awkward. But unfortunately, it wasn't the best moment to meet her, because the girl wasn't in the mood at that moment. But at the same time, Luca was still trying his best to make her start to trust him and not think badly of him. He tried to smile and pretend he didn't notice her lack of moods. It was obvious to him that he should be the one to start this conversation, for the girl was certainly not in the mood for it. But surprisingly, she still decided to ask him one question. She was very curious to know why he wanted to serve her, to which the lad replied that he had heard only good things about her from the stories of Prince Jean, that is, her brother. And today he had seen for himself the justice of his words when he saw how Anemone had rescued the young lady. And so he made his choice and decided that he wanted to serve someone like her. He even said that it was like love at first sight for him, but it sounded a little ambiguous. And when a girl asked him what it meant, he said it was when one person falls in love after seeing another person only once. Luca was truly smitten with her from the first minute they met, and even then he knew for sure that she was his best choice. To which the girl asked if she understood correctly that he was now telling her not of love, but of devotion to his mistress. To which the guy replied that she got it right, and that's what he meant. Judging by the conversation, the girl already after a few minutes made a conclusion, and realized that he was a very good man and perfect for cooperation. And he also boldly said he'd do whatever it took to prove himself worthy of her attention. And even if he has to give his life for it, he's willing to do it and he'll never regret it. After a while, he suggested that the girl might like a rest and said he had to leave her, and it turns out he really wasn't imagining it. He was right. Anemone was already too tired and wanted to rest, because it was just another day where a lot of new and unexpected things happened, as usual. Even as she lay down to rest, she thought about whether she should trust this guy, and whether he was really as good as he seemed at first glance. When suddenly she started to see some dream in an unfamiliar area. It was like some kind of movie. Everything was strange and very unclear. In the midst of the big mountains stood her parents with many helpers. She didn't understand what was going on, and wanted to understand what it all meant, because it was like they were trying to warn her about something, and thanks to the dream, she needed to understand something. When all of a sudden, big rocks start falling off the mountain, and they're headed straight for her parents. There were so many of them that there was no way to stop it and keep yourself safe. Everyone started to run away and save themselves, but not everyone succeeded, as not everyone was able to react in time and notice the danger. Her parents were very scared. They did not know how to react to everything that was happening and where to run to, because these stones were falling with great speed and from a great height. After that, the girl saw a very scary picture and realized that it was one of her parents. She immediately woke up and was very much frightened. The girl had never seen anything like it. Besides, she had not a very pleasant association with such terrain. After that, Anemone couldn't continue to sleep properly and started thinking about something. She started to calm herself down and talk about how it was just a nightmare and nothing bad had happened. The girl understood that she didn't have to pay attention to it, because everyone had something like that. But at some point, she began to realize that it wasn't like a dream, and it was as if she was really there and saw everything with her own eyes. She wanted very badly to know something about it and to come to some conclusions as soon as possible, for she could not just sit still and ignore what she saw. And of course she went at once to a room where there were a great many books. She chose the most suitable one and began to study something. It was a book about some divine being she'd been told about since she was a child. He defended the lives of all the royal people of Ricol and was the most famous in the whole world. But that wasn't all. He could predict the imminent doom and saved people from imminent doom. Soon, the creature gave this ability to the holy girl. And after a while, thanks to this ability, she was able to see dreams and thus saved a lot of people. After reading this information, she had so many thoughts about how all this knowledge and information could help her. She even had the idea that it could be that everything she had seen in her dream today could soon happen in real life. But if that's the case, she should have done everything she could to prevent that from happening, and thanks to the dream, saved her parents and a lot of others. But how to do it? The girl didn't even know yet. But it was obvious that she wouldn't ignore this dream and would definitely come up with something, because she knew she couldn't let something like that happen. And besides, there must be some way to prevent that terrible situation from happening. Meanwhile, the girl had gone to her parents' house for breakfast. They were talking about something very important, and as suddenly began to talk on the subject of that they really needed to visit the village. Her parents wanted to go there soon on important business. In the village of Rodea, there have been heavy rains for a few days now, and they want to visit the residents and install new facilities to prevent emergencies. Their visit can help the population, so they decided to tell their children about it and to warn them that for some time they would not be at home and would be left in the care of the helpers. But it seems that the children were not very happy, and apparently the moment had come when the girl must somehow influence their decisions, because she's the only one who knows that this is the village where her parents are going to die, and if they go there, they won't be able to come back. Anemone didn't understand how to tell them this information and how she should act in this situation, because most likely, no one would just believe her. Afterwards, she turned her attention to herself and asked everyone to listen to what she was going to tell them about it.